I'm going to go through assignment one for disability management. The spreadsheet can be a little complicated, especially if you haven't worked with Excel before, but this is an Excel that was made by WCB in collaboration with the health and safety program to kind of teach us students about what their forms are and how incidents are recorded with WCB. So there's at the bottom here, there's different tabs. So there's 16C1, 16C2, 16C3 are the forms from WCB. And then this would be what human resources at the company would generate, or possibly you, depending on the situation. Bigger company will have good records on man hours, smaller company less so. So let's start. So payroll would be how much the company paid out to employees. And this is something that companies have to report to WCB every year. So it's how much money they paid out. They actually have to also report who their contractors were. And then that's the whole contractor course. But in short, that's a couple of pieces of information WCB needs from employers. Going through industry premium rate. So if we just take a look at this real quick, we see that the payroll went down and then went up again. The premium rate for the whole industry is actually going down. And then this is actually going up. So this company is getting a worse safety record while the overall industry is improving. Base premiums, we see that overall the base premiums are going up year over year. In real life, that's probably why the OHSP was hired, and the fact that their claims are going up, and WCB probably has contacted Regal Barbecue about being concerned about the number of injuries that are occurring at the company. So there's no discount because the Regal Barbecue is actually worse than the industry norm. They're paying a surcharge then every year. They're paying additional premium because their health and safety record is getting worse. Their surcharge will keep going up and up. And eventually WCB can refuse to insure a company because it's so unsafe. So there's certain industries where WCB won't insure. And one of the reasons why WCB won't insure certain industries is because the costs are too high. The risks are too high. So the costs, medical aid is where an employee went and saw a nurse practitioner, nurse, or a doctor at a publicly funded hospital or healthcare clinic. And then that's the medical cost. So when you go to a doctor's office, often they will ask, is this related to workplace injury, right? So that's where, if you answer yes, they fill out the form and send it to WCB, and that's why they ask who your employer is. As a side note, I worked for a company that had a very common name in Saskatchewan. So we got a lot of claims that weren't actually ours because there was a couple other companies that were named very similarly to us. So every month I had to go through these forms and find out if those were current employees or not, the claims, and then I would appeal all the ones that weren't our employees. Rehab. So $3,000, $1,000. You think about $1,000 is not a lot of money. If any of you've seen a physiotherapist, it's like 150, 200 bucks an hour. So really you're looking at maybe for the whole year, 12 hours of physiotherapy for all the employees' injuries, right? Through WCB claims. So pretty low. Rehab costs here went up a lot that year. But even still, pretty low when you're thinking about like $100 or $200 an hour. And people are off work for long periods of time. Compensation would be how much money WCB paid employees while they were off work. So they were either partially off or fully off work, and they're getting paid for that. And then the total costs are self-explanatory. Lost time claims are where the worker missed the next day of work. So you go into the doctor's office, you return the next day to work, that's a no time loss. So it's a little confusing because you're like, well, I got hurt on a Tuesday and I missed the rest of Tuesday. That's not a time loss injury. Like if you miss Wednesday, that's a time loss injury. That makes sense? So you have to miss the next day after the injury for it to be a time loss injury. And there's no differentiation if it's 90 days or 1 day you missed, it's a time loss injury. So no time loss, and then worst of all is a fatality. Those are usually the ones that are reported in the news. Whenever there's a fatality, it's usually a big story in the news for a little while. And then that's where the Labor Relations Workplace Safety in Saskatchewan will do the investigation for that as well. So compensation days, those are the days off. So often one of the biggest ways a company can save money is developing a return to work plan. So from the course, a return to work plan is people get injured, how do we get them back to work in a meaningful way to do some work, right? So like where you're having 560 days off of work, that's a lot of days off, right? Like that's a huge cost. So you're gonna look at that and like just the indirect costs, right? Like how is their work getting done? Are we hiring new staff? HR, they're filling out all these forms for WCB and submitting records. Employer, like the supervisors are having to come up with alternative work. Like it's a huge time commitment, right? For that compensation days. And then the compensation days drop again. But just keep in mind, that's what WCB is paying for that. So if you look, 174 days missed cost the company $20,000. 563 days is like 61,000. So like, and by that I mean like those aren't direct costs, but WCB is an insurance company, same as your house or SGI. Whenever you have claims against you, your costs go up, right? So there's not a direct thing. So the injury rate code, again, we take a look at it. This for this whole industry, we just see that our rate code is higher. The injury rate code is higher. Cut that out. It will go into 16C2. So this one is not as useful, in my opinion, for making the graphs, but it is part of WCB. So it has the name of the person, the year of their incident, whether it was a lost time or non-lost time, and then it has a breakdown of the costs, and then it has the total cost. And it has the compensation days. So the problem with this, and this is kind of good for seeing that there's a couple of really big claims that year. That's why most of the days are missed, is 2 big claims. So maybe that's something you should think of in regards to that. Confidentiality. So you can't have the employees' names on here. But this is kind of a new thing for Excel. I'm going to show you. So you can highlight all this and you can go analyze data. And it might give you some hints on data trends. For whatever reason, my internet is very slow, but it'll show you some breakdowns of like what it thinks is important. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not for that. But anyway, like I said, this graph is kind of good for like figure out maybe where you might want to make your graphs, but this information probably is not great for graphable because of the names, right? This one, 16C3, I find is probably one of the most useful forms, and mostly column K. So what you can go through is figure out the main body parts per year that keep getting injured. So that was one of the graphs inside of Brightspace. You can do, and that's another thing, if we go back here, sorry, 16C1, you can do the costs per year as well as a graph. That was one of the other graphs there. And then what other stuff can you go through? You can go through here. Again, there's like lower back, this back lumbar, like you should just turn that into back injuries. So like some of us you're gonna have to sort and rename, which is fine. Like you can, if you're not sure how to do this, you can just rename this back. And then you can do things like it can count for you and all sorts of stuff in Excel, but really I would rename it to common things. So like right eye, just name eye, hand, right? Like you don't probably need to rename, right? Like this is back, like, so it's more common, right? And then like foot, because if it's like that, hand, and then there's a few things you can do as well. I'll show you real quick, is you can delete some of this stuff, these columns here, and then you can go data sort up here, so you can highlight all of this, and then you can go data sort, and you can sort by whatever column you want. So like if you're interested in what the costs were, injury dates, and then you can go like sort by injury date, which is column I, then you can add a level, then you can sort by the body type, so K, to get them together. Anyway, it's WCU when they said this, we didn't format this correctly, but there's some things that you can do like that. Yeah, so a few things like that. This is given to you as well. So what I did for you guys is I just took the payroll divided by an average pay, and then that's the average number of employees per year. Why is that important? I multiplied the average number of employees by a working year to get the number of exposure hours. Okay, so like this is provided for you, so you don't need to worry about the math behind it. But pretty much if you're curious, you can look at the Excel data. So I took the payroll divided by this equals 78. And then this I multiplied by 8 times B4. Anyway, I did that for you, and then so I'm giving you a big hint. I really want to see the severity rate. The reason for that is you're comparing the severity rate against all industry. So if you're like, I don't know what he's talking about severity rate, go back into Brightspace, look up what the severity rate graph looks like, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I'm gonna get rid of this and cut. So I kind of did this graph for you. All I did was I went here on the 16C1 and the time loss. I did time loss, non-time loss, and fatality there's none, so I didn't put that in there. So time loss, non-time loss, so graph 1. I put the data in here. You can highlight this graph afterwards. So the non-time loss is where people return to work the next day. Time loss is where they're off for at least a day. Insert. And then I'm going to pick bar graph, and then that's it. So if you didn't see me do that, I'm just going to cut this graph, highlight the data in the chart, insert, bar graph, and then we have to make a title. So this would be, capitalize that, time and non-loss time, 2018 to 2022, right? So there you go. And that's that. So like, why would you want to track this data? Well, big hint there, if you put a return to work program in place, what should we see occur? So using course ideas, what should we see occur after you put a return to work program in? More time off, less time off, fewer incidents. Oh, some hints there. Okay. So the next one, I just made these numbers up. So you're going to have to pull that information up from 16C3 if you want to do this graph. There's other graphs you can do for sure. Like there's a lot of graphs provided, but these are kind of some of the most common ones. So insert. So I'm going to do a bar graph again. And there's a couple of ways of presenting the information, right? So like, you can do it fancy. Just keep in mind that like businesses generally are very conservative. And by that, I mean like the guy is an old accountant. So like, it doesn't have to be flashy. It just has to communicate the message that you want to communicate. If you're like, I have no idea, you can click on recommended charts. So you can do a line graph. You can do, and so like, you can't see this very well. This one is broken up by the years, and the injuries are broken up that way. I would probably flip it if I was going to do that, and do it more by, after you work here for a bit, what should we see happen? So like, I'll give a hint. If you go to the SASM website, there's a course, like an ergonomics course. So if you got workers and supervisors to take that course, management's going to go like, okay, that took 4 hours of time to get all these people through the course. That cost, and you can do some quick bar math here, there's 78 equals 70 employees times 4, and a loaded cost per employee is 110 hours. That morning course of shutting down the plant is going to cost $34,000. like not of real money, but that's, you know, so if you make recommendations, like, oh, we need a course, there kind of has to be good reasoning behind what you're doing, because those workers aren't making product, right? And then like, yeah, and in short, that's always a concern. It's like, well, these people are not making products, so what are we doing? But what if there's a day where there is no production due to a variety of factors, like there's no materials, like there's something wrong with the plant that needs to be fixed, and we have workers sitting around? Well, that could be a good time when you have the training ready to go, and then you do the training then. What if there's a layoff? That's not a bad thing to say, but if there's a big layoff, when the workers come back, is that a good time to do it as part of the orientation, right? The very first day, so they're not hurt or whatever, right? Again, you do that. Like, there's a bunch of like things and thought processes that like could go into training, rather than just like, we need this training. Well, there's big costs to training. Like, you have to pay someone to come in, or even you developing it. Well, how many days is it going to take for you to develop a good course? Does it cover what we need to? In short, you should look up SASM, because part of the assignment definitely is that you're part of a SASM. What training is available at no cost there for them? Maybe a lunch and learn, like, who knows? You can look this up. So we'll move on to the next graph. So there's a link in the assignment for this, the injuries, illness, and fatality. So days with cases with days away from work, job restriction, or transfer. So this would be kind of like your frequency rate. So at least it gives a comparison, right? So if you go back to the frequency rate here, so number of incidents, the base is either 200,000 or a million. It depends on how many man hours are worked, so you don't end up with weird fractions and that. But anyway, as long as the data you're comparing to it has a similar denominator, it's fine. But yeah, it's we're gonna go use this formula. So if you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, I'm gonna do the frequency rate for Regal Barbecue. I'll do the first 2 of 5, just because like there's some formulas involved, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so number of incidents multiplied by 200,000 and then divided by the total man hours. So let's go to Excel. We'll go into the formula here. So the incidents, again, for the first year we have is 2018. There's 11 incidents. So just highlight this. These are the total number of things, right? So total would be the number in this case, because there's no fatalities, of lost time and non-lost time. So the first year is 11, next year is 10. So I'm just going to flip back to the sheet here. So first year is 10, next year is 11. So the man hours, we're going to go to the exposure hours. So I'm just going to write this down for whatever reason. So is so it's 143,514. So that's the number of hours worked in 2018. 2019, there was 134,489. So I'll go and put that in our information here. So 143,514, and then we have 14489. The constant we had was 200,000. 200 constant was 200,000, right? So if we go back, we'll just take a look at this formula. So it's the number of accidents multiplied by 200,000 divided by the man hours. So here we go. So I'm just gonna put a space in there, so maybe it's easier to see, but I put bracket, and this is where you can just put 10 in, or you can use the value. So that would be B2. So it's like battleship, value B2 multiplied by, again, just shrink this down, multiplied by 200,000. So I'm going to multiply by D2 bracket divided by number of man hours. And then we have equals. So here's the fun trick, is that we can drag and drop, and it'll auto figure it out, right? So again, if you're like, what the heck is this guy talking about? So this is the frequency rate that we're calculating from the course, right? So just real quick, if you don't trust that math, we can go equals bracket this. So B3 multiplied by the constant of 200,000 and then divided by the number of man hours. I think that the value is the same. Okay, so and the formula should, it's a really straightforward formula. So like I'll let you guys do the next ones, but we're gonna look at this. So I'm just gonna honestly, I'm gonna just make up some values here. And we're gonna just do this up. So I'm gonna show you kind of the graphing of this, not the answer. So like these ones should be right, hopefully. And then these ones I'm gonna let you do yourself. So I'm just making up numbers right now. So I made them bad. And so if we don't remember this little box in the corner, you can drag and drop, and it'll be that. And then we can drag and drop this, and it copies the formula. Okay, so what we kind of want to do next. Okay, is that a good frequency rate or not? We don't know, right? So I'm gonna go to the US data here. And so the Bureau of Labor, so days away from work, total number of reportable cases. So, right, we had total number of reportable cases, and we're going to go down and into the manufacturing area and go down here. Be some metal thing, and you can always go Control F here. So, but so steel product manufacturing purchase steel. So they're saying the industry norm is 3.7. So I'm just going to type that twice. And then again, we can use this little box in the corner to copy paste it. And this is the OSHA rate. Yeah, like don't necessarily have to do this graph either. So I'm going to hide this. So you go here and you go hide, and then now we can highlight this graph, insert just like we did before. This is going to be a line graph. Except for the data's messed up, right? So I set up the chart incorrectly. So what I should have done is done the years on the top. You can flip this. If you had a lot of data, you can flip the axes and all sorts of stuff in Excel. But I'll be honest, I'm kind of like end of the day here. Just trying to get through this. Control C, Control V. Commands are really good to learn too. You don't know those. So again, 3.7, 3.7, and it can copy paste that right or left. And then we have this. So it's 13.9. So like I said, you can do it a different way, but I'm just going to do it real quick. 31.9, 22 point. Oh. And then 32, right? We round it up. So it's the same data, just arrange different, insert, and then I'm going to do a line graph. Like I said, one of the students here, I'm sure will be like, why is he doing it this way? But I think this is the easiest way to show somebody that's never done this, is just showing that how to move it around. So the frequency rate at Regal versus OSHA rates, right? So not only we do this, and like I said, I made up some of this, so don't quote me on those. Or use my data, like try and figure it out for yourself using the formulas. So what would that show us? Well, like metal manufacturers are making similar product using similar tools, pretty bad. Because there's inclusive days that where the guys are moved away from those, we're not even counting, well, I'm assuming there's no return to workplace here, because like, people are off so much. But like you see, the rate is just so much higher, right? Like this is not good, right? So this just shows like if management were to say like, okay, but like, we're going through growing pains or whatever, you're like, okay, well, compared to companies that make similar products in similar industries, albeit American ones, our rate is 5 times higher than theirs, or 8 times higher than theirs. That shows like there's a lot of work to be done in developing a safety program.